Close your eyes. The past is about to speak. When you think of a medieval castle, you might imagine towering stone walls gleaming in the sun, knights in polished armor, and noble ladies listening to a lute in a sun-dappled courtyard. You probably picture a great hall, alive with the sound of music and laughter, its long tables groaning under the weight of a magnificent feast. Roasted swans, glistening pigs, and pyramids of fruit. But for the vast majority of people who lived and worked within those walls, life was far from a fairy tale. It was a world of cold stone, hard labor, and a constant, lingering aroma of wood smoke, damp wool, and questionable sanitation. For you, the castle cook, the heart of this world isn't the throne room. It's the smoky, chaotic, and perpetually hot kitchen. Honestly, with no refrigeration, no running water, and every meal made from scratch over an open fire, you probably wouldn't last a day. Before we delve into the grit and the grease, take a moment to settle in. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always a quiet pleasure to think of this community, spread across so many places, coming together for a story. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, where history whispers you to sleep. Your day begins in darkness. There is no gentle awakening, no soft morning light easing you from your dreams. Instead, the first thing you feel is the cold. It's a deep, penetrating cold that has settled into the very stones of the castle overnight, a damp chill that seems to cling to the air itself. It finds its way through the thin, coarse wool of your blanket, seeping into your bones. You are lying on a pallet stuffed with straw, and with every slight movement, you can feel the individual stalks rustle and poke against the rough-spun linen of the sack. It's a lumpy, uneven surface that has offered little true rest. You are not alone. The small, low-ceilinged room you share with two of the kitchen boys is close to the great kitchens, a strategic position that ensures you are never far from your duties. The air is thick and still, heavy with the scent of sleep, unwashed bodies, and the faint, sour ghost of last night's spilled ale. One of the boys, a lad of no more than 14, mutters in his sleep and rolls over, the sound of his straw mattress a loud crinkle in the profound quiet. This is a silence that modern ears rarely experience. There is no hum of electricity, no distant traffic. The only sounds are the soft breaths of the sleeping boys, the scuttling of a mouse behind the wattle and daub wall, and the distant, rhythmic tread of a guard making his rounds on the battlements above. You don't need a rooster to tell you it's time to rise. Your internal clock is wound far tighter than that, set not by the sun, but by the insatiable appetite of the castle itself. The fires in the great kitchen must be coaxed back to life long before the first hint of dawn streaks the sky. If the ovens aren't hot enough by the time the bakers arrive, the entire day's rhythm will be thrown off, and the displeasure of the castle steward is something you learn to avoid at all costs. His quiet disappointment is somehow worse than the Lord's roaring anger. You sit up, swinging your legs off the pallet. Your bare feet meet the floor, not with the smooth, clean touch of modern flooring, but with the uneven, splintery surface of rough-hewn wooden planks. The cold is a shock, sending a shiver straight up your spine. You've been awake for some time, actually, Many people in this age experience two distinct periods of sleep. You went to bed not long after dusk, slept for 4 or 5 hours, and then woke naturally into a quiet, meditative state in the middle of the night. Historians still debate how common this first sleep and second sleep truly was, but for you, this waking period is a small mercy. It's a time to lie still in the dark, gathering your thoughts, planning the complex choreography of the meals ahead, and mentally preparing your body for the grueling day to come. It's your only truly private time, a small island of stillness before the relentless tide of work pulls you under. Now that period is over. It is time to move. You reach for your clothes, which lie in a small, folded pile at the foot of your bed. They are simple and practical. First, a pair of loose linen under trousers, then a long, belted tunic of coarse, undyed wool. The fabric is stiff and scratchy against your skin, a constant, low-grade irritation you've long since learned to ignore. You don't have a wardrobe of options. These are your work clothes, your evening clothes, your everything clothes. You pull on a pair of soft leather shoes, worn smooth with use. Standing, you stretch your back, feeling the familiar aches that have settled deep into your muscles. This is a physical life, a life of lifting, carrying, chopping, and stirring for hours on end. There is no concept of ergonomics, no thought given to the long-term health of your joints. You simply work until your body can work no more. The first task is always the same: fire, the lifeblood of the kitchen. Without it, there is no cooked food, no boiled water, no warmth. There is nothing. You move quietly out of the small sleeping chamber, your eyes having long since adjusted to the profound gloom. You navigate the narrow corridor by memory and touch, one hand trailing along the cold, rough stone wall. The air here smells different, tinged with the ancient, greasy soot that coats every surface near the kitchens and the lingering, sweet and sour scent of the herb room nearby. You pass the pantry, its heavy oak door shut and barred. Later, you will have to account for every loaf of bread, every ounce of salted fish taken from its shelves. But for now, your destination is the great kitchen itself. As you push through the thick woolen curtain that serves as a door, you are met not with warmth, but with a vast and cavernous cold. The kitchen is a huge, stone-vaulted chamber, its ceiling lost in the shadows high above. It feels dead and empty, a sleeping giant. In the center of the room are the faint, ruby-red embers of yesterday's main fire, glowing softly in a mountain of gray ash within the massive, walk-in hearth. This is your starting point. This tiny flicker of residual heat is the seed from which the entire day's energy will grow. The challenge of waking this giant, of feeding it wood and air until it roars back to life, is your first battle of the day. And as you stand there in the cold and the dark, you know it is a battle you must win. You take a deep breath, the cold air stinging your lungs, and you begin. You approach the great hearth, a structure that is less a fireplace and more a small, cavernous room of its own. It is wide enough for 3 men to stand abreast and deep enough that you must step inside it to manage the fire properly. The stone floor beneath your feet is gritty with a fine layer of ash, and the air inside the hearth is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 meals, the phantom scent of roasted meats, burnt sugar, and decades of wood smoke that has blackened the stones to a permanent, deep charcoal. It's an almost sacred space, the altar upon which you will make your daily offerings. Your first task is to carefully sift through the ashes of yesterday's fire. Using a long-handled iron rake, you gently pull the gray blanket of ash aside, searching for the largest, most promising embers. These glowing coals are precious. They are the memory of yesterday's heat, and coaxing them back to life is far easier than starting a fire from scratch with flint and steel, a process that could take a frustratingly long time on a damp morning. You find a cluster of them, pulsing with a faint, deep orange light, and carefully gather them into a small pile. Now you must feed them. Beside the hearth is a large wooden box filled with tinder, dried moss, shredded bark, and fine wood shavings you painstakingly prepared the evening before. You take a handful of the driest moss and place it gently over the embers. You get down on your knees, the cold stone unforgiving on your joints, and lean in close. You purse your lips and blow, not a hard gust, but a long, steady, gentle stream of air. It's a delicate art. Too little air and the embers will die. Too much and you'll blow them out. For a moment, nothing happens. The embers seem to dim, and a familiar flicker of anxiety tightens your chest. The entire castle's schedule rests on this single breath. Then a tiny wisp of smoke, thin and white, curls up from the moss. You blow again, a little more steadily this time. The smoke thickens. A small, hesitant flame, pale yellow and barely visible, licks at a piece of bark. It flickers, dances, and then catches. You feel a small surge of triumph as the flame grows stronger, greedily consuming the tinder you offer it. You add a few small, dry twigs, arranging them in a lattice structure to allow for airflow. You can now feel the first hint of warmth on your face, a welcome sensation in the deep chill of the kitchen. The fire crackles softly, a sound that signals the true beginning of the day. This is a moment of quiet focus, a ritual you perform every single morning. There are no thermostats to fiddle with, no pilot lights to rely on. Your relationship with fire is direct, personal, and demanding. It requires skill, patience, and respect. It is a powerful servant but a terrible master, a truth you are always aware of as you work within this vast, soot-stained chamber. You add larger pieces of kindling now, then small logs of well-seasoned oak and beech, carefully building the fire up from a fragile flicker to a steady, reliable blaze. The light pushes back the oppressive darkness, casting long, dancing shadows that make the hanging pots and utensils on the walls look like strange, metallic beasts. The main hearth is not your only concern. Along one wall of the kitchen are two enormous brick ovens. Their heavy iron doors are cold to the touch. These will be needed later for baking the bread and roasting the larger joints of meat, and they take hours to heat to the correct temperature. You use a long-handled shovel to transfer a scoop of glowing coals from the main fire to the mouth of each oven. You add more kindling and wood, starting smaller, secondary fires that will slowly and evenly heat the massive brick structures from within. The process is a form of practical science, passed down through generations of cooks. You know from experience exactly how much wood is needed, how to arrange it for the most even heat, and how to read the color of the stones to know when the oven is ready. Historians might call this pyrometry, but for you, It is simply knowledge soaked into your bones through years of repetition. As the fires grow, you can finally see the kitchen in its full, imposing scale. The ceiling soars 2 stories high, designed to draw the immense heat and smoke upwards towards ventilation slits near the roof. The walls are lined with an arsenal of cooking equipment. Great iron cauldrons, some so large a child could curl up inside them, hang from adjustable hooks over the main hearth. Spits of varying lengths, designed to hold everything from a row of small birds to an entire ox, lean against the wall. There are long-handled frying pans called spiders for their leg-like stands, bronze skillets, and earthenware pots of every shape and size. On a long, sturdy wooden table in the center of the room, you can see the faint outlines of cleavers, knives, and wooden mallets. It is a formidable and slightly intimidating space, built for production on an industrial scale. The air is beginning to change. The initial damp chill is slowly giving way to a dry, smoky heat. The smell of burning oak fills the room, a clean, sharp scent that will soon be overpowered by the aromas of cooking food. You can hear the steady roar of the growing flames, a constant, low rumble that will be the soundtrack to your entire day. One of the kitchen boys, Thomas, shuffles in, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He is young, but he knows the morning routine. Without a word, he picks up 2 large leather buckets and heads for the door. The fires are lit, but they are useless without the second crucial element of your craft, water. And obtaining it is the next great labor of the morning. You watch him go, knowing that his work and yours has only just begun. The castle is waking up, and soon it will be hungry. While the fires build and the ovens slowly gather their heat, you turn your attention to the next relentless task. Before a single vegetable can be washed, a single pot of pottage started, or a single greasy hand cleaned, you need water. And you need a tremendous amount of it. The kitchen is a thirsty beast, and there are no taps to turn, no convenient sinks with running water. Every single drop must be fetched by hand from the castle well. You step out of the now warming kitchen into the pre-dawn courtyard. The air is sharp and cold, and the sky is shifting from the deep black of night to a bruised purple gray. The stars are beginning to fade. The castle courtyard is a wide, open space, its ground a mixture of trampled earth and mud, hardened by the cold. It is still mostly quiet. You see the lone figure of a guard silhouetted against the lightening sky on the far wall walk, and you hear the soft nicker of a horse from the stables. Otherwise, the world is hushed, holding its breath before the day's chaos begins. The well stands in the center of the main bailey, a squat cylinder of stone with a heavy wooden winch mechanism built over it. It is the heart of the castle's water supply, a source of life that is heavily guarded and meticulously maintained. Its location within the castle walls is a strategic necessity. A besieged castle with no access to fresh water is a castle already defeated. You join the kitchen boy, Thomas, who is already there, his breath pluming in the cold air as he works the winch. You take your place on the other side of the winch mechanism. The two of you work in a practiced, silent rhythm. One of you lowers the heavy wooden bucket, its iron hoops making a scraping sound against the stone lip of the well. You can hear the rope unspooling, a long sighing sound, followed by a distant, hollow splash as the bucket hits the water far below. Then begins the hard part. Together, you grip the rough, splintery wooden handle of the winch and begin to turn. It is grueling work. The bucket, now full of water, is incredibly heavy. The winch groans in protest with every turn, the rope creaking under the strain. Your shoulders and back muscles burn with the effort. This is not a gentle, picturesque task. It is a raw, physical struggle against gravity. You lean your body into it, your feet slipping slightly on the slick, damp stones around the well's base. You do this again, and again, and again. Bucket after bucket is drawn up from the cold depths, the water clear and shockingly cold. You pour the contents of each hard-won bucket into larger wooden barrels that are set on a small, two-wheeled cart. There is a subtle hierarchy even here at the well. You, as the cook, are overseeing the task, but you are not above lending your own muscle to it. Soon you are joined by another kitchen boy and two of the scullery maids, young girls whose primary job is to wash the endless tide of greasy dishes. They are all wrapped in worn wool shawls, their faces pinched with cold. The work speeds up with more hands, but the sheer volume of water required is staggering. You will need water for boiling meats and vegetables, for washing produce, for making ale and bread, for cleaning the tables and floors, and most voluminously, for washing the mountain of pots, pans, and plates that a single large meal can generate. You estimate you will need at least 200 gallons today, and every gallon represents another back-straining trip to this well. This constant, heavy labor is one of the great unseen realities of medieval life. While nobles might concern themselves with politics and warfare, the daily existence of the common person was defined by such relentless physical tasks. There's no modern equivalent to this kind of foundational work. You can't just order a water delivery. There is no plumbing infrastructure. The very fabric of the day is woven with these threads of intense manual effort. It's a stark reminder that what we consider basic amenities were once hard-won luxuries. As you work, the castle slowly comes to life around you. The sound of a blacksmith's hammer begins to echo from the forge, a steady, rhythmic beat that will provide a percussive backdrop for the rest of the day. Grooms lead horses from the stables, their hooves clattering on the cobblestones. More guards appear on the battlements, their movements purposeful as they change shifts. You see a page, a boy of noble birth, scurrying across the courtyard on an errand for his lord. His fine clothes a stark contrast to your own practical woolens. He glances at you and your crew with an air of detached indifference. You are part of the castle's machinery, as essential but as unremarkable as the stone walls themselves. Finally, the first 2 barrels are full. Thomas and the other boy strain to pull the small cart back towards the kitchen, its wooden wheels groaning and wobbling over the uneven ground. You and the maids follow, each carrying 2 more heavy buckets suspended from a wooden yoke across your shoulders. The yoke digs into the muscles of your neck and shoulders, and you have to walk with a careful, measured gait to avoid sloshing the precious water. Your arms ache, your back complains, and your hands are raw and red from the cold, wet rope. And this is only the first run. There will be several more before the day is out. Returning to the kitchen is a relief. The room is now noticeably warmer, the fires blazing brightly. The air is thick with smoke, but it's a welcome change from the biting cold outside. The water from the barrels is ladled into the great cauldrons hanging over the fire, and a satisfying hiss fills the air as the cold water meets the hot iron. The day's cooking can finally, truly begin. You have tamed the fire and fetched the water. You have provided the two fundamental elements. Now, you must turn them into sustenance, a task that requires a different but no less demanding kind of effort. You wipe your wet hands on your tunic, the coarse wool scratching your skin, and turn your mind to the first meal of the day. With the cauldrons heating over the fire, your focus shifts to the first meal of the day. This is not the grand feast for the Lord and his family. That will come later. This is breakfast for the lower ranks, the engine that powers the castle. The guards who have stood watch through the cold night, the stable hands, the blacksmiths, the grooms, and your own kitchen staff. All of them need a hot, substantial meal to fuel their morning's labor. Speed and economy are the guiding principles here. The centerpiece of this meal, and indeed of most meals for the common folk, is pottage. The word itself sounds plain, and the reality is not much different. It's a thick, savory stew or porridge, a one-pot meal that is both filling and endlessly adaptable. Its composition depends entirely on what is available. There is no fixed recipe, only a general method. You are not a chef following precise instructions. You are a pragmatist making do with what you have. You start by heading to the larder, a cool, dark storeroom adjacent to the kitchen. The air inside is earthy and pungent, a complex mix of smells. Dried herbs hanging from the rafters, salted fish in barrels, wheels of hard cheese on shelves, and the sharp, vinegary scent of pickled vegetables in large clay jars. You take a scoop of dried peas and a handful of barley from their respective sacks. These are the foundation of the pottage, the starchy base that will provide bulk and energy. From a hook, you take a side of salted pork, its surface slick with brine. You use a heavy cleaver to hack off a chunk, the blade making a dull, thudding sound against the wooden block. This is not for flavor in the modern sense. It's for fat and salt, two vital components for anyone engaged in hard physical labor. Back in the main kitchen, you toss the salted pork into one of the large, simmering cauldrons. A greasy slick immediately spreads across the surface of the water. Then you add the barley and dried peas. Now for the vegetables. On a long, scarred wooden table, you have a pile of root vegetables that were brought up from the cellars yesterday. They are still caked with dirt. You hand a knife to Thomas and one of the scullery maids and set them to the task of peeling and chopping. There are onions, carrots, and parsnips. These are not the vibrant, uniform specimens you'd find in a modern market. The carrots are pale, almost white and often forked. The onions are small and potent. You take an onion yourself and begin to chop. Your knife skills are brutally efficient, honed by years of daily practice. There is no artistry to it, just speed. The rhythmic thump of your knife on the thick wooden board is soon joined by the less certain, more careful chopping of the others. The sharp, acrid smell of the onions stings your eyes, but you are so accustomed to it that you barely notice. The chopped vegetables are scraped directly from the table into the cauldron. Next, you add the pot herbs. These are the greens that give the pottage its primary flavor. You have a small herb garden just outside the kitchen door, and you send one of the maids to gather what she can. She returns with a handful of sturdy greens, savory, parsley, and sage. These are not delicate finishing herbs. They are robust, hardy plants that can withstand long boiling. You chop them roughly and throw them into the pot. Historians often note that the diet of the medieval peasant was likely richer in certain greens and herbs than our modern one, not for culinary fashion, but out of necessity. You used what grew readily. The pottage is now a bubbling, murky mixture, grayish-brown in color. It will simmer for at least an hour, the flavors melding and the grains and peas softening into a thick, spoonable mass. You give it a stir with a paddle-sized wooden spoon, the motion slow and heavy. As it cooks, the kitchen fills with a savory, earthy aroma. It is not a refined or complex scent, but it is the smell of sustenance, a smell that promises warmth and a full belly. While the pottage simmers, you prepare the bread. This isn't the fine, white manchet bread that will be baked for the Lord's table later. This is trencherman bread, a coarse, dark loaf made from rye or barley flour. It's dense and heavy. You take several large, round loaves from a wicker basket, and using a long serrated knife, begin to slice them into thick hunks. For some of the lowest-ranking servants, a thick slice of this bread will serve as their plate, a trencher that soaks up the juices of the meal and can be eaten at the end. This practice, while sounding primitive, was a clever, zero-waste solution. However, we can only speculate about how often the dirtiest, soggiest trenchers were given to the dogs or the poor rather than being eaten. Finally, there is the ale. Ale, not water, is the staple drink for almost everyone, including children. The water from the well is used for cooking, but drinking it straight could be a risky affair. The brewing process, which involves boiling the water, kills most of the harmful bacteria. The resulting small beer is low in alcohol but high in calories, a source of liquid nutrition. Large jugs of it are brought up from the cellars and placed on the tables. Soon, the workers begin to file in. They don't eat in the great hall. They take their meal here in the kitchen or in a small, adjacent room, sitting on rough wooden benches. They are a tired, hungry group, their faces smudged with dirt or soot, their clothes practical and worn. You and your staff ladle the thick, steaming pottage into rough-hewn wooden bowls. Each person is given a chunk of the dark bread and a horn or wooden cup of ale. There is no conversation, just the sounds of eating, spoons scraping against wood, the soft tearing of bread and appreciative slurps. For these few minutes, there is a pause in the day's hard labor. The hot food chases away the morning chill and replenishes their strength. You watch them eat, a quiet sense of satisfaction settling over you. You have fulfilled your first and most fundamental duty of the day. You have fed the castle's workforce. There are no Yelp reviews for this questionable tavern stew, no compliments to the chef. The proof of your success is the sight of empty bowls and men and women rising from the benches, ready to face the day's work with renewed energy. Their resilience is fueled by your labor, a cycle of effort and sustenance that keeps the great stone heart of the castle beating. But there is no time to linger on this thought. The high table will be expecting its midday meal, a far more complex and demanding affair. With the breakfast rush over and the lower ranks dispersed back to their duties, a different kind of pressure begins to build. The brief, functional calm of the morning meal gives way to the complex and high-stakes planning for the Lord's midday dinner. This will be the main meal of the day, a multi-course affair designed not just to feed, but to impress. It is a performance and you are its director. Your first stop is the larder, but this time your purpose is not to grab common staples, but to conduct a meticulous inventory. You are joined by the steward, a man named Edmund. He is severe and exacting, dressed in finer wool than yours, and he carries a wax tablet and stylus, the medieval equivalent of a clipboard and pen. He is the castle's accountant, and nothing goes in or out of the storerooms without his knowledge. This daily accounting is a crucial ritual. A castle's wealth can be measured in its store of food, and any spoilage or unexplained loss is a serious matter. You walk through the cool, dim storerooms, your senses on high alert. You run your hand over sacks of flour, feeling for any dampness that might signal the beginning of mold. You lift the lids from barrels of salted fish, the sharp, pungent smell of brine filling the air. You are checking for any hint of off odors, any sign that the fish is becoming slimy or soft. You inspect the hanging sides of bacon and cured hams, looking for any discoloration or patches of rot. This is a world without expiration dates. Your eyes, your nose, and your sense of touch are the only tools you have to gauge the safety and quality of your ingredients. It's a constant battle against decay. Edmund makes meticulous notes on his wax tablet, scratching figures into the soft surface with his stylus. 3 wheels of hard cheese remain, he might murmur, his voice flat and businesslike. The barrel of pickled cabbage is half empty. We will need to send to the village for more onions before the week is out. Your conversation is a delicate negotiation. The Lord's wife has a fondness for sweet custards, which require a great deal of eggs and precious sugar. You know you are running low on sugar, which is imported at great expense. My lady will be expecting a dessert, you might say, phrasing it as a statement of fact rather than a request. Edmund will frown, running a calculation in his head. The sugar must last until the next merchant arrives from the south. Use honey for the custards today, and be sparing with it. This is the central puzzle of your job, reconciling the desires of the high table with the finite reality of your supplies. The Lord might return from a hunt and demand a feast for 20 unexpected guests, and you are simply expected to produce it. This requires not just cooking skill, but also immense foresight and resourcefulness. You must always have a plan B and a plan C. What if the venison from the hunt is tough? You will have to stew it for hours with wine and spices. What if the shipment of wine is delayed? You will have to stretch the remaining stock, perhaps by watering it down for the lesser nobles, a risky move that could be seen as an insult. Historians still argue about the exact level of variety in the diet of the nobility. While certainly more diverse than the peasantries, it was still heavily dependent on the seasons and the success of local agriculture. A bad harvest or a harsh winter would be felt even at the Lord's table, albeit in a less life-threatening way. There would be fewer fresh vegetables, more salted meats, and a general monotony to the meals that even the most expensive spices could not entirely disguise. Today, the inventory is promising. A deer brought in by the hunters late yesterday hangs in the cold room. This is good news. Venison is a high-status meat, and its presence will please the Lord. There is also a good supply of chickens and a few geese. The fish pond yielded a decent catch of carp and eels yesterday, which are now swimming in a large wooden tub of water in the corner of the larder, ensuring their freshness. With the inventory complete and the main ingredients confirmed, you begin to map out the menu in your head. This isn't written down in a cookbook. It's a mental blueprint, a sequence of preparations that must be timed to perfection. You will need to start the venison roasting soon, a process that will take hours. The fish must be killed and cleaned. The poultry needs to be plucked and dressed. You mentally assign tasks to your staff. The young boys will be responsible for turning the spits, a tedious but essential job. The maids will pluck the birds and prepare the vegetables. You will handle the butchery of the deer and the all-important sauces, which are the true mark of a skilled cook. You also consider the visual aspect of the meal. A feast was theater. The food had to look spectacular. You might decide to boil the peacock, then skin it carefully, roast the meat, and then redress it in its own vibrant feathers to be presented at the table as if it were still alive. Perhaps you will make a simple meat pie, but mold the pastry into the shape of a castle turret. These creations, known as subtleties, were designed to create wonder and conversation at the table. They had little to do with taste and everything to do with displaying the Lord's wealth and the cook's ingenuity. You leave the larder, your mind buzzing with lists and timings. Edmund makes one final note on his tablet and heads off to his other duties, leaving you in sole command of the culinary domain. The weight of expectation is heavy. A poorly cooked or unimpressive meal could bring shame upon the entire household. There are no written job descriptions or performance reviews, but your reputation is forged daily in the heat of the fires. You are only as good as the last meal you served. And with the midday meal for the Lord and his family looming, the pressure is on to create something memorable. The first step will be the bloodiest. The planning is over. The time for messy, physical work has arrived. You move from the relative order of the larder to the blood and viscera of the butchering area, a stone-paved section of the kitchen that can be easily sluiced with water. The main course for the Lord's table, the magnificent deer brought in by the hunt, hangs from a thick iron hook, its head and hide already removed by the huntsman. Even so, it is a formidable sight. A large, muscular carcass that must be transformed from a raw animal into a series of elegant roasts and humble stews. This is not a task for the squeamish. It is a grim, practical job that you must approach with the dispassionate skill of a surgeon. You and your most experienced kitchen helper, a burly man named Jeffrey, lay out your tools on a nearby bench. They are not the delicate, specialized knives of a modern butcher. You have a few heavy cleavers for breaking through bone, a long, sharp knife for slicing through muscle, and a small, curved blade for more delicate work. The steel is well used, bearing the nicks and scratches of countless previous carcasses. First, you must open the body cavity. With a steady hand, You make a long, deep incision from the breastbone down to the pelvis. The smell that rises is visceral and primal. The coppery scent of fresh blood mixed with the green, herbaceous aroma of the animal's last meal. You reach inside, your arms slick with warmth up to the elbows, and begin the process of removing the organs. Nothing is wasted. This is one of the most fundamental principles of your kitchen. Waste is a sin, both economically and morally. The liver, heart, and kidneys are set aside. They are highly prized and will be cooked separately, perhaps grilled with onions or minced and baked into a rich pie. The stomach and intestines are carefully removed and handed over to one of the scullery maids. Her job will be to take them outside, empty them, and wash them thoroughly in a bucket of salted water. They will later be used as casings for sausages. This recycling of every part of the animal is a shocking tidbit for modern sensibilities, which are used to seeing meat as a sterile, prepackaged product. Here, you are intimately familiar with the anatomy of the food you serve. Now you begin to break down the carcass itself. Jeffrey uses a heavy cleaver, bringing it down with controlled force to separate the legs at the joint. The sound is a dull, wet thud of steel hitting bone and cartilage. You direct him, indicating where to cut. The two large hindquarters, the haunches, are the prime cuts. These will be reserved for roasting on the spit for the high table. They are carefully trimmed and set aside. The rest of the animal is methodically disassembled. The tougher meat from the shoulders and neck is cut into smaller chunks. This will go into the pottage for the castle staff tomorrow, or perhaps into a slow-cooked stew, tenderized by hours of simmering. The ribs will be roasted. Even the bones will not be discarded. They will be chopped into pieces and thrown into the stock pot, a cauldron of water that is perpetually simmering at the back of the hearth. This pot is never fully emptied. Water and bones are constantly added, creating a deep, rich broth that forms the base for countless sauces and soups. It's a primitive form of a modern chef's mother sauce, a continuous source of flavor. The work is physically demanding and messy. The stone floor around you is slick with blood. Your tunic is stained, and your hands and arms are coated in a sticky film of fat and gore. There is no luxury of disposable gloves or antibacterial soap. Cleanup will consist of buckets of cold water and a coarse cloth. The risk of infection from a small cut is a constant, low-level threat, a fact of life you try not to dwell on. While you and Jeffrey are engrossed in your grim task, the rest of the kitchen is a hive of activity. You can hear the rhythmic thwacking sound of the maids plucking the chickens and geese, sending small clouds of white feathers drifting through the smoky air. Another boy is methodically scaling the carp and eels from the fish pond, his knife scraping away the slick, silvery scales. The hierarchy of meat is clearly visible. The venison, a product of the noble hunt, is at the top. The poultry is next, followed by the fish. Each is being prepared for a different course of the great meal. After what seems like an hour of intense work, the deer is gone. In its place is a neat arrangement of its constituent parts, each destined for a different purpose and a different social rank. The prime cuts for the lord, the lesser cuts for his household, and the scraps and organs for the servants and for future meals. It is a perfect illustration of the castle's social structure, laid out in flesh and bone on your kitchen table. You take a moment to wash your hands and arms in a bucket of water, the cold liquid a shocking but welcome sensation. The water immediately turns a murky pink. You look at the haunches of venison, now ready for the spit. Your next task is to prepare them for roasting, to season them, and to ensure they cook perfectly over the open fire. The bloodiest part of the day may be over, but the most skillful part is about to begin. The transformation from raw meat to a dish worthy of a lord requires more than just a strong arm and a sharp knife. It requires the subtle magic of spices. Having dismantled the deer, you now move from the role of butcher to that of alchemist. The success of the venison roast, and indeed the reputation of your entire kitchen, will now depend on the careful application of spices. This is where true artistry and a significant portion of the Lord's wealth comes into play. You approach a large, iron-bound wooden chest that stands in a corner of the kitchen. This is the spice coffer, and it is always kept locked. The steward, Edmund, is the keeper of the key. You must summon him from his duties, and he arrives with a jangling set of iron keys at his belt. The act of unlocking the coffer is a small ceremony in itself. It signals that a high-status meal is being prepared. Spices are not used for the daily pottage of the servants. They are a luxury reserved exclusively for the high table. Edmund turns the heavy key in the lock, the mechanism groaning in protest, and lifts the heavy lid. The moment the coffer opens, a wave of exotic fragrance washes over you, a stark and wonderful contrast to the prevailing kitchen smells of smoke, grease, and boiling cabbage. It is a scent of distant lands, of sun-drenched shores and perilous sea voyages. Inside the chest are small earthenware jars, leather pouches, and wooden boxes, each containing a precious, fragrant powder. This collection is worth more than a peasant might earn in a lifetime. You see the deep, reddish brown of cinnamon, the sunny yellow of turmeric, the dark, woody cloves, and the tiny, wrinkled spheres of black pepper. Pepper is the king of spices, the most common and sought after, yet still incredibly expensive. There is ginger, mace, and nutmeg. And then there is the most precious of all, saffron. The tiny, thread-like stigmas of the crocus flower are kept in a small, tightly sealed box. Their value is almost equal to their weight in gold. A single thread can tint an entire dish with a vibrant yellow-orange hue and impart a delicate, hay-like flavor. Its use is a direct and unambiguous statement of wealth. Medieval European cuisine, particularly for the wealthy, was far from the bland, unseasoned affair it's often imagined to be. In fact, it was explosively flavorful, with a heavy reliance on spices that might seem strange or even overwhelming to a modern palate. Spices were not just for flavor. They were a status symbol. A heavily spiced dish told every guest at the table that the host was rich enough to afford these imported luxuries. There was also a belief, rooted in ancient medical theories, that spices helped to balance the body's humors and aided in the digestion of heavy foods like red meat. You carefully measure out what you need, using small, carved wooden spoons. You take a generous amount of black pepper, some cloves, and a pinch of mace. You will not use the saffron on the venison. You are saving that for a delicate chicken dish or a rice pudding, where its color can be shown to best effect. Edmund watches your every move, his sharp eyes making a mental tally of the diminishing supplies. There is no casual sprinkling here. Every grain is accounted for. With the precious spices in a small bowl, you return to the venison haunches. First, you stud the surface of the meat with whole cloves, pushing the small, hard buds directly into the flesh. Then you create a paste. You grind the peppercorns and mace together in a stone mortar and pestle, the rhythmic grinding releasing another wave of sharp, sweet scent. You mix the ground spices with salt and a little bit of melted lard to form a thick, dark rub. With your hands, you massage this mixture deep into the meat, ensuring every surface is coated. The seasoned haunches are now ready for the fire. You and Geoffrey carefully thread one of the largest spits through the center of the meat, securing it with iron prongs. Lifting it is a two-man job. You carry it over to the great hearth, where the fire is now a roaring inferno of heat. You position the spit on the large iron andirons, setting it at the correct height above the glowing coals. Below it, you place a long, narrow dripping pan to catch the precious, flavorful fats that will render out during cooking. This fat will not be wasted. It will form the base of the gravy, or be used for frying other foods. Now begins the long, slow process of roasting. One of the kitchen boys, young Thomas, is given the unenviable task of turning the spit. He sits on a small stool a careful distance from the intense heat, his face already flushed red. His job is to turn the crank handle of the spit slowly and constantly, for hours on end. If he turns too slowly, one side will burn. If he turns too fast, the meat will not cook evenly. It is a monotonous, hot, and mind-numbingly boring job, yet it is utterly critical to the success of the meal. This is why these junior positions were often called spit jacks or turnspits. In some very wealthy households, they even developed mechanical, clockwork-driven spits, or, in a quirky and rather sad historical footnote, used small dogs in a sort of hamster wheel to power the mechanism. You will supervise the boy, of course, but your attention is already splintering. The venison is the slow-moving centerpiece, but a dozen other dishes must be prepared to accompany it. The chickens need to be poached, the fish baked, the sauces started, and the vegetables prepared. The kitchen is shifting into its highest gear, a controlled chaos of chopping, boiling, frying, and baking, all orchestrated by you. The air is now thick with a cacophony of smells. The sharp scent of spices on the roasting venison, the savory steam from the cauldrons, the clean scent of herbs, and the ever-present pall of wood smoke. The great midday meal is taking shape, one laborious, fragrant step at a time. With the venison turning rhythmically on the spit, a process that will anchor your attention for the next several hours, the kitchen transforms into a frantic workshop. You are no longer just a cook. You are the conductor of a chaotic orchestra, and every member of your staff is a musician with a specific, vital part to play. The midday meal for the high table is not a single dish, but a procession of them, served in 2 or 3 courses, each course consisting of multiple dishes served simultaneously. The coordination required is immense. You turn your attention to the fish. The carp and eels, fresh from the larder, have been cleaned and prepared. Fish is a crucial part of the menu, especially if the day happens to be a Friday or one of the many other fast days dictated by the church, on which eating meat was forbidden. Even on a feast day like today, fish provides a lighter counterpoint to the heavy venison. You decide the carp will be baked. You lay them in a large earthenware dish, stuff their cavities with a mixture of chopped herbs, parsley, sage, and a little thyme and breadcrumbs. You then pour over a generous amount of verjuice, a tart liquid made from unripe grapes. Its acidity will cut through the richness of the carp, which can sometimes have a muddy flavor. The eels, a great delicacy, will be stewed in red wine with onions and a few peppercorns. While you are preparing the fish, the maids are working on the poultry. The chickens are being gently poached in a cauldron of seasoned broth. Poaching will keep their meat tender and moist. Later, you will use this chicken meat in a variety of ways. Some might be served simply sliced, but a more impressive presentation is required for the Lord's table. You decide to make a blancmange, one of the quintessential dishes of the medieval noble diet. This is not the sweet, gelatinous pudding the name implies today. The medieval version is a savory, delicate dish. The maids will shred the poached chicken meat into fine fibers. You will then pound this meat in a large mortar with ground almonds, which have been soaked and skinned, a tedious task in itself. This paste is then mixed with rice flour, chicken broth, and a little sugar to create a thick, creamy, off-white puree. It's a dish that is deliberately pale and refined, a sign of its aristocratic nature, as it uses expensive ingredients like almonds and sugar. The final touch will be a garnish of fried almonds and a sprinkle of ginger. Historians note that the texture of food was incredibly important in this period. Wealthy patrons who might have had poor teeth appreciated these soft, pureed dishes. So before this great story continues, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're enjoying our journey together. Your support means the world. Meanwhile, Jeffrey, your trusted second-in-command, is in charge of the pies. A great meat pie, or pie, is another staple of the feast. He is making a great pie, a large, freestanding pastry case filled with a mixture of meats. Today, it will contain the leftover poultry, some of the less noble cuts of venison, and perhaps some pigeon, all stewed in a rich, spiced gravy. The pastry, known as a coffin, is not the light, flaky pastry of modern baking. It is a thick, sturdy hot water crust made from flour, water, and lard. Its primary purpose is not to be eaten, but to act as a cooking vessel and a preservative for the filling inside. The lid will be elaborately decorated with pastry leaves and shapes before being baked in the great oven. You are a whirlwind of motion, moving between stations, tasting, adjusting, and directing. You dip a wooden spoon into the simmering eel stew. Too sharp. You call for a spoonful of honey to be stirred in, balancing the acidity of the wine. You check the color of the blancmange. It is perfectly pale. You glance at the spit, where Thomas is still dutifully turning the crank. The venison is beginning to brown, its surface glistening as the fat renders and drips into the pan below. The smell is intoxicating. The vegetable preparations are simpler. Root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, and turnips, are boiled until tender, then mashed with butter and a pinch of nutmeg. Green vegetables are rarer and more seasonal, but you have some cabbage that will be shredded and boiled, and a basket of leeks that will be stewed gently in broth. Salads or salads are also prepared, but they are not the raw leafy greens of today. They typically consist of boiled and cooled vegetables, herbs, and flowers, all dressed in oil and vinegar. Eating raw vegetables was often considered unhealthy. The kitchen is now at the peak of its frenzy. The heat is almost unbearable, a combination of the roaring hearth, the hot ovens, and the steam rising from a half-dozen boiling pots. The air is a thick soup of competing aromas: roasting meat, pungent spices, sweet wine, sharp verjuice, and boiling vegetables. The sounds are a symphony of industry: the rhythmic chop of knives on wood, the bubble and hiss of boiling liquids, the scrape of metal spoons against iron pots, and the constant, low roar of the fire. You are in your element. Every sense is engaged. You see the color of the roast, smell the doneness of the pastry, feel the texture of the blancmange paste, hear the sizzle that tells you a pan is hot enough, and taste every sauce, every stew, every component to ensure it is perfectly seasoned. There is no room for error. The steward will be down soon to announce that the Lord is seated and ready. The performance is about to begin, and all the frantic, sweaty, chaotic preparation must coalesce into a seamless, elegant, and impressive display of culinary power. You take a deep breath of the hot, fragrant air. It is almost time. As the various dishes approach their final stages of cooking, your role shifts once more, from a master of heat and flavor to a master of illusion and artistry. The midday meal for a lord is not merely about sating hunger. It is a theatrical event, and the most dramatic moments are often provided by the subtleties. These are elaborate, often whimsical food sculptures presented between courses, designed to provoke astonishment and delight among the diners. Today, you have planned a particularly ambitious subtlety. Weeks ago, you instructed the castle's carpenter to build you a small, hollow wooden framework in the shape of a castle tower, complete with miniature battlements. Now you bring out the second type of pastry you prepared earlier. This is not the sturdy, functional pastry of the great pie. This is a finer dough, made with more expensive flour and butter, intended for show. You roll it out and carefully drape it over the wooden frame, pressing it into the shape of the tower. You use a small knife to score stone patterns into the surface and create tiny arrow slits. This pastry-covered tower is then carefully baked until golden brown and hard. While it cools, you turn your attention to the filling. This is where the true trickery begins. You take the hearts and livers from the deer and the chickens, chop them finely, and sauté them with onions and a rich blend of spices. To this mixture, you add breadcrumbs and egg yolks to bind it together, creating a savory forcemeat. This will be the mortar for your creation. But a simple pie in the shape of a tower is not subtle enough. You call over one of the kitchen boys and give him a small cage containing several live songbirds, which were caught this morning. This is the secret ingredient. You carefully pack the savory meat mixture into the bottom half of the cooled pastry tower. Then, just before it is time to serve, you will gently place the live birds into the top half of the tower and place the pastry lid on top. When the pie is presented at the high table and the Lord cuts into it, the birds will fly out, creating a moment of surprise and wonder. This might seem bizarre or even cruel to modern eyes, but in the spectacle-driven world of the medieval feast, it was a celebrated marvel of culinary engineering. It was a joke, a piece of theater, and a display of power all at once. This is just one example of the lengths to which cooks would go. Another famous subtlety which you have made before is the cockentrice. This involves cutting a piglet and a large chicken, a capon, in half, then sewing the front half of the piglet to the back half of the chicken, and vice versa, creating two fantastical hybrid beasts. They would then be roasted, glazed, and presented as if they were real creatures. The amount of labor and skill involved in such a creation was immense, and its sole purpose was to be looked at and talked about. The actual taste was secondary. While you are assembling the final parts of your tower subtlety, you are also overseeing the plating of the other dishes. There are no individual plates as we know them. The food will be served on large communal platters called mess platters, which will be shared by groups of 2 or 4 diners. Slices of the venison, glistening and perfectly roasted, are arranged on a large pewter platter. The baked carp is carefully lifted from its dish and garnished with fresh parsley. The creamy, white blancmange is spooned into a silver bowl and decorated with a precise pattern of red and white aniseed comfits. Color is incredibly important. The goal is to create a visually stunning tableau on the table. A dish might be divided in 2, with one half colored yellow with saffron and the other half white, or even red with sandalwood powder. You instruct a maid to make a green sauce for the fish, not just for flavor, but for visual contrast. She pounds parsley and other green herbs in a mortar, mixes them with breadcrumbs and vinegar, and pushes the mixture through a fine mesh cloth to create a vibrant, smooth sauce. Everything is a performance. Even the way the food is carried from the kitchen to the great hall is part of the ritual. A procession of servants, led by the steward, will line up. The most important dishes, like the venison roast and your subtlety pie, are carried aloft with great ceremony. The great hall itself is a scene of controlled chaos. The Lord, his family, and his most honored guests sit at the high table, which is raised on a dais. The lesser nobles and household officials sit at long trestle tables in the main body of the hall. The air is filled with the sound of conversation, the music of minstrels in the gallery, and the barking of dogs under the tables, waiting for scraps. Just as you are putting the final touches on the platters, a page rushes into the kitchen, his face flushed. The Lord is seated. They are ready for the first course. A surge of adrenaline courses through you. This is the moment of truth. You give a sharp nod to the line of waiting servants. Go, you command. The procession begins. Platters are lifted and the servants march out of the kitchen in a practiced, orderly line. You watch them go, your heart pounding. You have done everything you can. The hours of planning, chopping, roasting, and seasoning have all led to this moment. You wipe a smear of flour from your forehead with the back of your greasy hand and listen. You can't see the great hall from here, but you can hear the faint swell of music and voices. You listen for the gasp or the cheer that might signal the arrival of your subtlety. Your work is not yet done. There is another course to prepare, and then the monumental cleanup. But for now, you can only wait and hope that your performance is a success. While the grand platters and dramatic subtleties make their way to the Great Hall, the kitchen itself remains a world away. A hot, steamy, and rigidly stratified society. You may be the master of this domain, but you are not a solitary artist. You are the general of a small army, and every person within these smoky walls has a specific rank and a set of duties. The efficiency of the entire operation depends on this strict and unquestioned hierarchy. At the top, of course, is you, the head cook. You hold a position of considerable trust and responsibility. You are a senior member of the Lord's household staff, entrusted with his health and his reputation. A poisoned meal, whether by accident or by malice, is a constant, if low-level, fear in a noble household, and your vigilance is the primary defense against it. You answer only to the steward and the Lord himself. You command the budget for the kitchen. You design the menus, and the ultimate success or failure of every meal rests on your shoulders. It is a position that affords you a certain degree of respect, a private sleeping space, however humble, and slightly better pay, but the pressure is immense. Directly beneath you is Geoffrey, your second in command. He is an experienced cook in his own right, someone you can trust to manage the ovens or oversee the roasting when your attention is elsewhere. He knows your methods and can anticipate your needs. He might lack your flair for seasoning or your ambition for creating spectacular subtleties, but he is the bedrock of the kitchen's daily operation. A steady hand who can butcher a carcass or craft a perfect pastry coffin with equal skill. He will likely take your place one day, should you retire or move to a wealthier household. Below Geoffrey are the specialized kitchen servants. There is the larderer, who is responsible for the larder and the butchering of meats. There is the poulterer, who handles all the birds. There is the baker, a specialist who often commands his own separate bakehouse with its own staff, responsible for the vast quantities of bread and pastry the castle consumes. Today, with the great ovens fired up, he and his assistants are working alongside your team, their arms dusted white with flour. Each of these roles is a craft learned over years of apprenticeship. Then come the general kitchen hands, the maids and boys who perform the bulk of the repetitive, laborious tasks. They are the ones who pluck the endless parade of chickens, scale the fish, chop the mountains of vegetables, and pound ingredients in the mortars for hours on end. They are the turnspits, the water carriers, the fuel gatherers. Their work is essential but anonymous. They are the gears in the great machine. At the very bottom of this pyramid are the scullions or scullery maids. Their world is one of grease and grime. They work in a separate scullery area, often a damp, stone-floored room with a large sink or trough. Their job is to wash the endless tide of cookware, the soot-blackened cauldrons, the greasy dripping pans, the sticky pastry boards, and the hundreds of wooden and pewter dishes that will soon come flooding back from the great hall. They use coarse sand and harsh, lye-based soap, scrubbing with bundled twigs or rough cloths. Their hands are perpetually raw, chapped, and red. It is thankless, unpleasant work, but it is the foundation upon which the kitchen's hygiene, such as it is, rests. This hierarchy is not just about efficiency. It's a reflection of the rigid social structure of the world outside the kitchen. Everyone knows their place. A scullery maid would not dare to offer a suggestion on seasoning, and a kitchen boy would not dream of questioning an order. The lines of command are clear and absolute. You, in turn, must be a fair but firm master. You must know the strengths and weaknesses of each member of your staff. You know that young Thomas has the patience to be a good turnspit, but that he is clumsy and likely to drop a platter. You know that one of the maids has a delicate touch, perfect for skinning almonds, while another has the strength for endless chopping. The kitchen is its own self-contained world, with its own rules, its own language, and its own culture. It is a hot, loud, and often tense environment. Tempers can flare in the intense heat and pressure. A dropped pot, a burnt sauce, or a misunderstood instruction can lead to a sharp rebuke from you or Jeffrey. There's no human resources department to complain to, no concept of a supportive work environment. Efficiency is the only goal. Yet there is also a sense of camaraderie, born of shared labor and a common purpose. Jokes are exchanged in quieter moments, and a silent understanding passes between those who face the same grueling routine day after day. As the first course is being consumed in the great hall, a lull descends on the kitchen, but it is a tense, temporary one. The servants will soon return with the empty platters, signaling the need for the second course to be sent out. You use this brief window to prepare. You check on the great pie in the oven, its crust a deep golden brown. You taste the wine-and-deal stew one last time. You organize the next wave of dishes, ensuring they are hot and ready to be served. This orchestration of people is just as complex as the orchestration of ingredients. It's a human puzzle, a constant balancing act of authority, delegation, and supervision. Many historians focus on the battles and politics of the medieval world, but the smooth functioning of a great household like this was its own kind of victory, a daily triumph of logistics and human management. You stand in the center of your smoky, chaotic kingdom, a ruler in a stained apron, and prepare for the next wave of the assault. The castle's appetite is insatiable, and your small army must be ready. In the midst of the complex preparations for the midday feast, another monumental task is often underway, one that fills the entire castle with a rare and comforting aroma. Baking day. The two great brick ovens, which you started feeding with wood in the pre-dawn chill, have by now reached their optimal temperature. You can tell by the way the interior bricks have turned from black with soot to a clean, glowing white, the carbon having been burned away by the intense heat. It's time to bake the bread. This is not a daily chore. The amount of fuel and labor required to heat the great ovens is so immense that baking is done in large batches, perhaps only once or twice a week. The baker, a specialist with flour-dusted arms and a perpetually serious expression, takes command of this part of the kitchen. While you are the master of the roast and the sauce, he is the master of the loaf. The process began yesterday with the making of the doughs. In a massive wooden trough, the baker and his assistants mixed flour, water, salt, and the leavening agent. This leaven is not a neat packet of commercial yeast. It's a piece of dough saved from the last baking day, a living culture of wild yeasts that has been kept alive and fed with flour and water. This starter gives the bread its characteristic tangy flavor, a taste that is unique to this castle's bakehouse. Historians refer to this as a barm or a sourdough starter, and its health and vitality are crucial to the quality of the bread. Two main types of bread have been prepared. First is the Lord's bread, the manchet. It is made from the finest, whitest wheat flour, which has been sifted multiple times through linen cloths to remove all the bran and germ. The resulting dough is pale, soft, and enriched with a little butter or milk. It will produce a light, fine-textured loaf, a symbol of purity and status. Eating white bread was a clear indicator of wealth, as it was less nutritious and more wasteful of the grain than whole wheat bread. The second type of bread is the household loaf, the dark, hearty bread you served for breakfast. It's made from rye or a mixture of rye and wheat flour with all the bran left in. It's denser, more nutritious, and considered far less refined. The baker has prepared dozens of these large, round loaves, which will sustain the castle's staff for the next few days. Before the loaves can be baked, the ovens must be prepared. Using a long-handled rake, the baker and his assistants pull all the burning embers and ashes out of the oven. The heat is not provided by a live fire during baking. It comes from the thermal mass of the bricks themselves, which have soaked up the heat over hours. This retained heat will bake the bread with a steady, even intensity that is impossible to achieve over an open hearth. The oven floor is then quickly wiped clean with a long-handled mop made of damp rags. Now, a flurry of activity begins. The risen doughs are knocked back, shaped into loaves, and arranged on long, flat wooden paddles called peels. The baker works with incredible speed and precision. He uses a small, sharp knife to slash the tops of the manchet loaves, a signature that is both decorative and functional, allowing the steam to escape and the loaf to expand evenly. With a practiced, fluid motion, he slides the peel deep into the glowing hot oven and, with a sharp jerk, deposits the loaves directly onto the hot brick floor. He repeats this process again and again, filling the vast oven with rows of pale dough. Once the oven is full, the heavy iron door is closed and often sealed with a bit of wet clay to trap every bit of steam and heat inside. Now begins a period of anxious waiting. There are no timers, no glass windows in the oven doors. The baker relies on pure experience. He knows, almost to the minute, how long each type of loaf needs. He might press his ear to the iron door, listening for the subtle sounds of the baking bread. He gauges the time by the position of the sun or by the progress of other kitchen tasks. This intuitive knowledge is the core of his craft, a science of the senses passed down through generations. While the bread bakes, the oven's heat is also used for other dishes. Geoffrey slides in the great pie, its pastry coffin now filled with its savory meat mixture. The dish of carp, swimming in its verjuice and herbs, is also placed inside. The ovens are a precious, finite resource, and every square inch of their hot space is utilized. After what feels like an eternity, but is probably only about 45 minutes, the baker declares that the manchet is ready. The seal is broken, the heavy door is opened, and a wave of incredible heat and the most wonderful smell imaginable rolls out into the kitchen. It's the smell of freshly baked bread, a scent that is universally comforting and delicious. It cuts through the greasy, smoky air of the kitchen, a reminder that even in this place of hard, messy labor, something pure and wonderful can be created. Using the peel, the baker expertly retrieves the loaves. They are now transformed golden brown with a crisp, crackly crust. He taps the bottom of a loaf. It makes a hollow sound, the sign of a perfect bake. The manchet loaves are placed on a wooden rack to cool before being sent to the high table. Then the larger, darker household loaves go in for their longer baking time. For a few moments, the frantic pace of the kitchen slows. Everyone, from you to the lowest scullery maid, pauses to inhale the rich, yeasty aroma. For the briefest of moments, the kitchen is not a factory or a battlefield. It is a hearth, a home. This simple loaf of bread represents civilization, a triumph of agriculture and craft over chaos. It is a symbol of community and sustenance. But the moment is fleeting. The second course is due, and the demands of the feast wait for no one. You take one last deep breath of the bread-scented air and turn your attention back to the simmering sauces and the sizzling meats. As the day wears on, the intense heat of the kitchen and the sheer volume of food being prepared bring another constant, pressing concern to the forefront: the peril of spoilage. In a world without refrigeration, the line between fresh and foul, between a wholesome meal and a dangerous one, is incredibly fine and often blurry. You are in a perpetual race against the relentless forces of decay. Your primary weapons in this war are your own senses. Your nose is your most trusted instrument, constantly assessing the air for the first faint, sweet, cloying scent of meat beginning to turn, or the sour, vinegary tang of milk on the verge of curdling. Your eyes scan for the telltale greenish blush of mold on bread, or the slimy sheen on the surface of old fish. Your fingers test the texture of vegetables, searching for the softness that signals the start of rot. This sensory vigilance is not just a matter of quality control. It is a matter of life and death. A bout of food poisoning, what they might call a surfeit or a bad humor, could be a minor inconvenience for a healthy adult, but it could be fatal for the very young, the elderly, or someone already weakened by illness. The larder and cellars are designed to slow this process. Their thick stone walls, earthen floors, and northern orientation keep them significantly cooler than the rest of the castle. But this is a far cry from modern, temperature-controlled storage. The primary methods of preservation are salting, smoking, drying, and pickling. The larder is full of these preserved goods: barrels of salted herring, great slabs of bacon hanging from the rafters, strings of dried apples, and jars of pickled onions and cabbage. These are your reliable winter staples. However, the prestige of a feast lies in the fresh ingredients: the venison from the hunt, the chickens from the coop, the fish from the pond. And these are the most vulnerable. An animal slaughtered in the morning must be cooked or preserved by evening, especially in the warmer months. There is no leeway. The concept of aging meat for flavor is a highly controlled modern process. Here, aging is simply a polite word for rotting. Today, you face a minor crisis. You are checking a small joint of pork that was intended for the servant's meal tomorrow. You press a finger into the flesh. It feels slightly tacky. You bring it to your nose and take a cautious sniff. It doesn't smell overtly spoiled, but it has that subtle, slightly too sweet odor that is the first warning sign. It is on the edge. You have a choice to make. To throw it away would be a terrible waste, an offense against the principle of thrift that governs your entire operation. The steward, Edmund, would certainly demand an explanation, but to serve it as is would be to risk sickening the staff. So you opt for the cook's classic solution: disguise. You decide the pork will not be roasted. Instead, it will be chopped into small pieces and boiled thoroughly. Then it will be incorporated into a heavily spiced and seasoned pie. The long cooking time will, you hope, kill whatever harmful elements are beginning to form, and the strong flavors of pepper, clove, and onion will mask any slight off taste. This is a common and necessary practice. Historians often debate whether the heavy use of spices in medieval cuisine was to display wealth or to cover the taste of slightly spoiled meat. The truth is likely a combination of both. Spices were a status symbol, but their powerful aromas were also incredibly useful for making borderline ingredients more palatable. It's a relatable pain point, a culinary gamble that chefs and home cooks have made for centuries, though with much lower stakes today. There is no Food Safety Administration to issue a recall. There is only your own judgment and a quiet prayer. Your battle against spoilage extends beyond meat. The milk from the castle's cows, delivered this morning, must be used today. Some will be used for the blancmange and any custards. The rest will immediately be started on its journey to becoming butter or cheese, more stable forms that can be stored for longer. You instruct a maid to begin churning the cream, a long, monotonous task of agitating the liquid until the fat globules clump together to form butter. Even the leftover bread from the high table presents a challenge. The fine manchet loaves, if not eaten, will go stale quickly. Stale bread is never thrown away. It will be grated into breadcrumbs for thickening sauces and stuffing birds, or sliced and baked again to make rusks, hard biscuits that will last for weeks. Or it will be used to make a pudding, not a dessert, but a savory dish where the stale bread is soaked in broth, mixed with herbs and eggs, and boiled or steamed. This constant need to use, preserve, and repurpose ingredients fosters an incredible ingenuity and a deep-seated hatred of waste. Every scrap has a potential future use. The fat skimmed from the top of the stock pot will be saved for frying or for making coarse soap. The vegetable peelings and outer leaves will be thrown to the pigs. The bones will be simmered for days until every last bit of gelatin and flavor has been extracted. This is a closed-loop system born of necessity. It is the original nose-to-tail, root-to-leaf cooking, not as a trendy culinary philosophy, but as a fundamental rule for survival. You look at the piece of pork, now simmering in a pot with a handful of strong herbs. You have made your decision and committed to a course of action. It is a small act of calculated risk and culinary salvage, one of many you will make this week. You have walked the fine line between thrift and poison, and for now, you believe you have stayed on the right side. The meal will be safe, and nothing will have been wasted. It's a small victory in the ongoing, unwinnable war against the natural order of decay. As the afternoon sun begins to slant lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard, the crescendo of the midday feast finally passes. The last platters of the second course have been sent out, followed by small dishes of candied fruit, spiced nuts, and wafers served with sweet wine to aid digestion. The great hall will now linger in a state of satiated, wine-fueled conversation for another hour or so. But for you and your staff, there is no rest. The rhythm of the kitchen must immediately shift to prepare for the evening meal. The evening meal, often called supper, is a far simpler and less formal affair than the midday dinner. It is lighter and primarily consists of repurposing the magnificent leftovers from the earlier feast. The principle of zero waste, which you applied to the borderline pork, is now applied to the grandest of dishes. Nothing that returns from the high table is discarded. Servants begin to trickle back into the kitchen, bearing the aftermath of the feast. They bring back the large platters, now looking much depleted. The mighty venison roast is reduced to a partial carcass. The great pie is a broken shell with some filling remaining, and the bowls of blancmange and vegetable puree are half empty. Your job is to look at this culinary wreckage and see not an ending, but a new beginning. You direct the disassembly. The remaining meat is carved from the venison bones. The best slices will be served cold for the Lord's Supper, perhaps with a sharp mustard sauce or a chutney of pickled fruits. The smaller scraps and trimmings are set aside. They will be minced finely and combined with the leftover filling from the great pie. Tomorrow, this mixture will be encased in a new pastry and baked into small, individual tarts for the upper household staff. The rule is simple. Food travels down the social ladder. What starts at the high table is progressively repurposed until every last calorie has been consumed by someone. The venison bones, now stripped clean, are unceremoniously tossed into the perpetual stockpot at the back of the hearth, joining the collection from yesterday's animals. They will add their flavor and richness to the ever-evolving broth that is the foundation of so many of your sauces and soups. The leftover blancmange, a delicacy of chicken and almond, might be mixed with a little more sugar and some rosewater to transform it from a savory dish into a sweet pudding for the ladies of the household. Even the trenchers, the thick slices of coarse bread that served as plates for the lower-ranking diners, are collected. The ones that are not too saturated might have their top layer scraped off and be used again. The truly soggy ones will be gathered in a bucket. Some might be given to the poor who gather at the castle gates, or, more likely, they will be thrown to the dogs that roam the courtyard. This practice is a classic example of human resilience and ingenuity, ensuring that even the plates are part of the food chain. The evening meal for the Lord and his family will be assembled from these carefully curated leftovers. Cold roast, a slice of the now cooled carp, a small bowl of the transformed blancmange, and some fresh cheese and fruit. It is served without the pomp and ceremony of the midday meal. It is a quiet, private meal, often taken in their personal chambers rather than the great hall. For the rest of the castle's inhabitants, supper is even simpler. It is often just a piece of the household bread, a wedge of cheese, and a cup of ale. Your kitchen staff, who have been on their feet since before dawn, will take their meal in shifts, eating quickly while standing in a corner of the kitchen. They might get to pick at some of a leftover tart or finish the dregs of a vegetable pottage. It is a hasty refueling, not a moment of rest. As the last light of day fades from the sky, the kitchen begins to slow its pace. The fires in the hearth are banked, reduced from a roaring blaze to a glowing bed of embers that will, with luck, last through the night. The great ovens tick and groan as they slowly cool. The frantic energy of the day dissipates, leaving behind a sense of collective exhaustion. The air, which was a thick soup of 100 different cooking smells, now simplifies into the basic aromas of cooling grease, wood smoke, and damp stone. You stand for a moment in the center of the vast, shadowy room. The day's great creative effort is over. The feasts have been produced, the Lord has been impressed, and the household has been fed. Now, only the most grueling task remains. The final act of the day is not one of creation, but of cleansing. The great cleanup awaits, a monumental effort to scrub away the evidence of the day's glorious, greasy, and chaotic work. It is a task that requires as much endurance as the cooking itself, and it stands between you and your lumpy straw palate. The day ends as it began, with water and hard physical labor. The creative and stressful part of your job is over, but the most physically taxing and relentless phase is just beginning. The kitchen, which was a stage for culinary theater just hours ago, is now a scene of greasy, grimy aftermath. Every surface, every pot, and every tool is coated in a film of fat, soot, and food residue. The final duty of the night is the endless, Sisyphean task of cleanup. This is the primary domain of the scullions, the lowest members of your kitchen hierarchy, but the sheer scale of the mess requires all available hands. You oversee the process, ensuring it is done thoroughly, but you are not above picking up a scrubbing cloth yourself. The work begins with the pots and pans. The great iron cauldrons, their interiors blackened and crusted with the remnants of pottage and stew, are the first challenge. They are too heavy to move. The scullery maids must climb inside them, using bundles of rough straw, sand, and harsh soap to scour the insides. The soap is not a fragrant, gentle liquid. It is a caustic block made from animal fat and wood ash lye, harsh on the hands but effective at cutting through the thickest grease. The wooden trenchers, platters, and spoons are scraped clean of any food remnants, scraps destined for the slop bucket, and then scrubbed in troughs of lukewarm, greasy water. There isn't enough hot water left for a proper wash. The fires have been banked for the night. This is a cold, unpleasant task. The water quickly becomes a murky, disgusting soup, but it is used over and over until the job is done. This lack of truly hot, clean water for washing is a significant reason why foodborne illness was so common. We can only speculate about the bacterial load on a clean, wooden spoon. The spit, now cool, is wiped down, its metal bearing the cooked-on stains of the day's roast. The dripping pan is scraped out, the solidified fat carefully saved in an earthenware pot for later use. The knives, cleavers, and other metal utensils are wiped clean and dried carefully to prevent rust, a constant threat in the damp castle air. They are then placed back in their designated spots, ready for the morning's work. The long wooden work tables, the epicenter of the day's chopping and mixing, are scraped down with metal tools to remove any caked-on dough or dried spills. Then they are scrubbed with the same harsh soap and coarse cloths. The floor is the final frontier. It is a mess of spilled liquids, dropped food, and tracked-in dirt. One of the kitchen boys uses a broom made of bundled twigs to sweep the solid debris into a pile. Then buckets of cold water, requiring yet another trip to the well in the dark, are unceremoniously sloshed across the stone flags. The maids get down on their hands and knees with hard-bristled brushes and scrub the floor, pushing the filthy water towards a drainage channel that runs through the kitchen and out into the courtyard. The air becomes thick with the smell of damp stone, lye soap, and wet soot. The comforting aromas of baking bread and roasting meat are a distant memory. This is the unglamorous reality that underpins the magnificent feast. For every moment of culinary glory in the Great Hall, there are hours of this back-breaking, foul-smelling toil. It's a stark reminder that convenience is a modern invention. There are no dishwashers, no stainless steel surfaces, no disposable wipes. Every bit of cleanliness is hard-won through sheer physical effort. As the staff works, a weary silence falls over them. The energy and adrenaline of the day have completely evaporated, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. The only sounds are the rhythmic scrape and scrub of brushes against stone and wood, the slosh of water, and the weary sighs of the workers. Their movements are slow, heavy, and automatic. Their backs ache, their hands are raw, and their clothes are damp and filthy. You walk through the kitchen, inspecting the work. You run a hand over a tabletop to check for any lingering stickiness. You peer into a cauldron to ensure it has been properly scoured. Your standards are high, not just for the sake of appearances, but for hygiene. A dirty kitchen invites rats and disease, and you are the first line of defense against both. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, the work is done. The kitchen is as clean as it can be. It is not sterile, not by any modern standard, but it is orderly. The tools are in their places, the pots are empty, and the surfaces are wiped down. The great room is once again quiet and shadowy, lit only by a single tallow candle and the faint, pulsing glow of the embers in the hearth. The giant is asleep again. Your staff shuffles out, their shoulders slumped, heading for their cold straw pallets and a few hours of precious, dreamless sleep. They will be up again in the dark to do it all over again. Their endurance is a quiet testament to the resilience of ordinary people. There lives a relentless cycle of hard labor, rewarded by the simple certainties of food and shelter. You are the last to leave, taking one final look around your domain before heading to your own small chamber. The day is finally, truly over. You finally retreat to your own small chamber, the last person to leave the now silent kitchen. The woolen curtain falls shut behind you, muffling the faint crackle of the dying embers and sealing you into the profound quiet of the sleeping castle. The room is small and Spartan, but it is yours alone, a privilege that marks your status. A single tallow candle, its flame sputtering and casting a weak, flickering light, sits on a small wooden stool next to your straw pallet. The air is cool and still. You sink down onto the edge of the mattress, the straw rustling loudly in the silence. Every muscle in your body aches with a deep, familiar weariness. Your back, your legs, your arms, they all protest with the accumulated strain of a 16-hour day of lifting, chopping, standing, and stirring. Your hands are raw and chapped from the constant exposure to water, heat, and harsh soap. You can still smell the ghost of wood smoke in your hair and on your clothes. You look down at your tunic, stained with grease, flour, and a dark spot you know is dried blood from the morning's butchery. There is no concept of a relaxing shower or a hot bath to wash away the day's grime. You simply pour a little water from a pitcher into a wooden bowl and splash it on your face and hands. The cold water is a shock, but it helps to cut through the fog of exhaustion. This is your moment of solitude, the only time you are not directing, supervising, or laboring. It is a brief island of peace in a relentless sea of work. You sit in the flickering candlelight, and for the first time all day, your mind is allowed to unspool. You replay the events of the day, the successful browning of the venison, the nerve-wracking moment before the subtlety was unveiled, the satisfying sight of the perfectly baked manchet loaves. You feel a quiet flicker of pride. You did your job. You fed the household, from the highest lord to the lowest scullion. You maintained the honor of the castle with a feast that was both bountiful and spectacular. You also think of the small failures, the minor crises averted. The pork that was on the turn, now safely encased in a pie. The moment of panic when you thought you were running low on wine for the eel stew. These are the small, invisible battles that define your professional life. There are no medals for this kind of victory, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing you navigated the day's challenges successfully. You have managed to impose order, flavor, and even beauty onto the raw, chaotic materials of the natural world, all within the demanding confines of this great stone fortress. Your thoughts may even drift to the world beyond these walls. You might wonder about the merchants who brought the precious spices, what their long journeys were like. You might think of the farmers who grew the grain for your bread, their lives dictated by the sun and the seasons. You are a vital link in a long chain of human effort that brings food from the field to the table. It is a humbling thought, but exhaustion is a powerful tide and it pulls you under. The complexities of the day begin to fade, replaced by a simple, overwhelming need for rest. You blow out the candle, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The sudden absence of light is total, a thick, velvety blackness that is rarely experienced in the modern world. You lie down on your lumpy pallet, pulling the thin, coarse wool blanket up to your chin. The straw rustles and pokes, but your body is too tired to care. The sounds of the castle are muted and distant. The wind sighs around the stone battlements high above. You might hear the faint cry of an owl, or the lonely footsteps of the midnight guard making his rounds. These are the soft, natural lullabies of your world. There is no hum of a refrigerator, no electronic glow of a charging phone, no distant wail of a siren. There is only the deep, profound silence of the night. Your mind, finally released from its duties, begins to drift. You are not thinking about tomorrow's menu or the inventory of the larder. You are simply letting go. Sleep comes not as a gentle descent, but as a heavy blanket, a welcome oblivion that smothers the aches and the worries of the day. You fall into the deep, dreamless slumber of the truly exhausted, gathering your strength to rise in the cold and the dark and do it all again. Your resilience is not a conscious choice. It is a necessity, the quiet, powerful rhythm of a life dedicated to the most fundamental of human needs. You sleep, and in your rest the entire castle is sustained, ready for the dawn. The day of the castle cook, with its relentless cycle of fire, water, and labor, fades into the quiet of the night. The smoke from the great hearth has settled, and the echoes of the bustling kitchen have fallen silent. What remains is a deeper understanding of the world behind the stone walls, a world not of fairy tale romance, but of incredible human effort and ingenuity. Their lives, dictated by the rising sun and the rumbling stomach of the household, show us a resilience that is both humbling and inspiring. The systems they created, from the perpetual stockpot to the repurposing of every last scrap, were monuments to a world where nothing could be wasted. As you settle deeper into your own comfort, appreciate the quiet hum of your own home, the effortless glow of a light, the simple miracle of clean water from a tap. The struggles of the past cast a long shadow, but they also illuminate the comforts of the present. Let the story of that distant, smoky kitchen be a gentle reminder of the peace you now enjoy. Let the deep quiet of the sleeping castle be the backdrop for your own restful slumber. The work is done. The fires are banked. There is nothing left for you to do now but drift. The past has told its story, and now it is time for your dreams.